The fluorescent lights of Save Mart buzzed overhead as Daniel stood quietly beside his mother in the checkout line. His sneakers had seen better days, the soles worn thin from walking everywhere since their old car finally gave up last winter. The jacket he wore was 2 sizes too big, a hand-me-down from a cousin he'd never met, but it kept him warm enough. That's all that mattered. His mother, Rachel, held their shopping basket close to her chest. Inside were the basics: a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, some pasta, a small jar of sauce. She had a handful of coupons clutched in her other hand, the ones she'd carefully cut out from the Sunday paper at the library. Daniel watched as she mentally calculated the total for the 3rd time, her lips moving slightly with each number. He knew that look. It was the same one she got every time they shopped, making sure they had just enough. The line moved slowly. Tuesday afternoons were usually quiet at Save Mart, but today seemed different. There was a heaviness in the air, though Daniel couldn't quite put his finger on why. Behind them stood a woman in a crisp white blouse and dark slacks, the kind of outfit his mother might wear if she worked in an office instead of pulling double shifts at Betty's Diner downtown. Her purse was designer, something Daniel only knew because he'd seen similar ones in the window displays when he and his mom walked through the nicer part of town. Beside her was a boy, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing brand new sneakers that probably cost more than their entire grocery basket. The boy's name was Connor, though Daniel didn't know that yet. Connor had his eyes fixed on something across the aisle, and Daniel followed his gaze. It was the fancy chocolate display, the one with the imported bars wrapped in gold and silver foil. The ones that cost $8 each. Daniel had looked at them once before, back when his little sister's birthday was coming up. He'd done the math in his head and realized he'd need to save his small allowance for 3 months just to afford one. He'd ended up getting her a candy bar from the dollar store instead, and she'd loved it anyway. Connor tugged on his mother's sleeve. "Mom, I want those chocolates." His mother, Linda, barely glanced over. "Not today, sweetie. We have plenty of treats at home. But I want those ones. The gold ones." "Connor," I said, "no. We're not getting them today." Daniel watched as Connor's face began to change. His cheeks flushed pink, then red. His small hands balled into fists at his sides. Daniel had seen this before, usually with younger kids at school, but something felt different this time. "I want them now." Connor's voice rose sharply, cutting through the quiet murmur of the store. Linda's expression tightened with embarrassment. "Connor, lower your voice. We're in public." "I don't care. I want the chocolates." "You never get me anything." That last part wasn't true, Daniel could tell. The boy's clothes were new, his shoes pristine. His backpack, tossed carelessly in the shopping cart, had characters from the latest movie everyone was talking about. But Daniel kept quiet the way his mother had taught him. "Mind your own business," she always said. "Everyone's fighting their own battles." But then Connor did something that made everyone in the checkout area turn and stare. He threw himself down on the floor, right there on the scuffed linoleum between the candy racks and the magazine display. His arms and legs flailed wildly, his voice climbing to a shriek that echoed off the walls. "I want it! I want it! I want it!" Linda's face went from pink to crimson. "Connor, get up right now. This is not acceptable behavior." But Connor was beyond hearing. He rolled onto his back, kicking his feet against the floor with loud thumps that made the whole scene even more chaotic. His screams mixed with angry sobs, and he started demanding other things too. A toy he'd seen in the electronics section. A video game. A new tablet because his old one was too slow. The cashier, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes, paused mid-scan of someone else's groceries. The other customers in line shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, pretending not to notice. Others stared with barely concealed judgment, their expressions saying what their mouths wouldn't. One elderly man shook his head and muttered something under his breath about kids these days. Daniel felt his mother's hand rest gently on his shoulder. He looked up at her and she gave him a small, sad smile. She'd seen tantrums before too, but this one was something else. This wasn't a tired toddler having a meltdown. This was a kid who'd learned that making a scene sometimes got results. Linda crouched down, trying to keep her voice steady despite the obvious humiliation burning in her cheeks. "Connor, if you don't get up right now, we're leaving the store with nothing." "Do you hear me?" "Nothing. I don't care. I hate you. You're the worst mom ever." The words hung in the air like poison. Linda flinched as if she'd been physically struck. Daniel saw her eyes start to glisten with tears she was desperately trying to hold back. His own chest tightened with a feeling he couldn't quite name. It wasn't his problem. It wasn't his family. But something about watching this whole thing unfold made him feel strange inside. Connor continued his performance, now adding in dramatic gasps between screams, the kind Daniel recognized as fake crying from kids who wanted attention. The boy grabbed onto a display rack, shaking it hard enough that a few candy bars tumbled to the floor. Someone needs to teach that child some manners, a woman whispered loudly to her companion, making sure Linda could hear. Absolutely disgraceful, her friend agreed, both of them clutching their purses tighter as if bad behavior might be contagious. Linda looked around helplessly, her authority completely undermined in front of a store full of strangers. She reached down to try and pick Connor up, but he went limp, making himself dead weight the way kids do when they don't want to be moved. His screams only got louder. Daniel's mother squeezed his shoulder gently, a silent message. Stay calm, don't stare. Let them handle their own situation. Rachel had always taught him that you never know what someone else is going through, that judging others helps nobody. But Daniel couldn't stop watching. Not because he enjoyed the spectacle or felt superior, but because something about the whole scene struck him deep in a place he didn't have words for. He looked at Connor, red-faced and furious on the floor, surrounded by expensive shoes and designer bags and every material thing a kid could want. Then he looked at his own worn sneakers, at his mother's careful counting of coupons, at their modest basket of necessities. And in that moment, Daniel's hand moved to his jacket pocket. His fingers touched something there, something he'd been carrying around for days, something small and precious to him, saved for something special. The screaming continued. Linda's voice cracked as she pleaded with her son. The other shoppers watched like it was a show they hadn't paid for but couldn't turn away from. And Daniel made a decision that would change everything. Before Rachel could stop him, Daniel stepped out of line. His mother's hand reached for him. A whispered "Daniel, wait," barely leaving her lips. But he was already moving. His worn sneakers made soft squeaking sounds on the linoleum as he walked past the other shoppers, past the judgmental stares and uncomfortable shuffling, straight toward the scene everyone else was trying to pretend they weren't watching. Connor was still on the floor, his tantrum reaching what seemed like its peak. His face was streaked with tears, half real and half for show, his voice hoarse from screaming. Linda knelt beside him, her hands hovering uselessly, not knowing whether to comfort him or discipline him or just disappear into the floor herself. Daniel stopped a few feet away. For a moment, he just stood there, this 12-year-old boy in his too big jacket, looking down at the chaos in front of him. The store seemed to hold its breath. What was this kid doing? Was he going to tell Connor off? Join in the judgment? Then Daniel did something nobody expected. He knelt down. Not aggressively, not dramatically. He simply lowered himself to the floor, sitting cross-legged about an arm's length from Connor. Close enough to be present, far enough to not feel threatening. Connor's screaming faltered for just a second, confusion breaking through his rage. Who was this kid? What did he want? Daniel reached into his jacket pocket. The movement was slow, deliberate. He pulled out something small, wrapped in colorful paper that had seen better days. The wrapper was slightly crumpled, warm from being carried close to his body. It was a chocolate bar. Not one of the fancy imported ones in gold foil, just a regular chocolate bar, the kind that cost 75 cents at the gas station. But the way Daniel held it, you'd think it was made of actual gold. He placed it gently on the floor between himself and Connor, then pushed it slowly toward the younger boy. Connor's screaming died down to hiccuping sobs, his eyes still wet with tears fixed on the chocolate bar with confusion. You can have this, Daniel said quietly. His voice was soft enough that only Connor and Linda could hear clearly, though everyone in the vicinity was straining to listen. If you want it. Connor stared at the chocolate bar like it was a puzzle he couldn't solve. But I want the expensive ones, he said, though his voice had lost most of its anger. Now he just sounded lost. Daniel nodded slowly. Yeah, those ones are really nice. I looked at them before, too. He paused, choosing his words carefully. This one isn't fancy. The wrapper's kind of messed up because I've been keeping it in my pocket, but it tastes pretty good. I was saving it for my little sister. Her birthday's next week. She's turning 7 and she really loves chocolate. Something shifted in the air. Connor sat up slowly, his tantrum forgotten, replaced by something heavier. He looked at the chocolate bar, then at Daniel's worn clothes, his scuffed shoes, the frayed edge of his jacket sleeve. Then back to the chocolate bar. You were saving it for your sister's birthday? Connor's voice was small now, almost ashamed. Yeah, but... Daniel glanced up at Connor's mom, then back to the boy. It seems like you're having a really hard time right now, and sometimes when we're having a hard time, something sweet helps, even if it's not the fanciest thing in the world. Connor reached out slowly and picked up the chocolate bar. He turned it over in his hands, studying it like he'd never really looked at a piece of candy before. The wrapper advertised some cartoon character promotion that had ended months ago. There was a small crease in one corner where it had been pressed against Daniel's phone in his pocket. But what about your sister? Connor asked, and there were fresh tears in his eyes now. Different tears, not angry ones. Daniel shrugged, trying to seem casual even though Rachel could see from across the way that this was breaking her son's heart a little. I'll figure something out. Maybe I can do some extra work for Mr. Peterson down the street. He sometimes pays me $5 to help him carry groceries up to his apartment. He's got bad knees. Linda, who had been frozen in shock this entire time, finally found her voice. Sweetheart, you don't have to. She looked at Daniel with eyes that were swimming with tears. You really don't have to do this, I know, Daniel said simply. But I want to. He looked back at Connor. Everybody has bad days. Everybody wants things they can't have sometimes. That's just how life is, you know? Connor looked down at the chocolate bar in his hands. Then with trembling fingers, he held it back out to Daniel. No, he whispered. You should keep it. For your sister. I'm sorry. I'm really, really sorry. The words seemed to cost him something. Daniel could see the boy's whole body shaking slightly, like something inside him was cracking open. Connor looked up at his mother with eyes that suddenly seemed years older than they had 5 minutes ago. Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I yelled. I'm sorry, I said. I said those mean things. You're not the worst mom. You're a really good mom. His voice broke. I don't need the chocolates. I don't need any of it. I'm sorry. Linda pulled her son into her arms, and this time he didn't resist. He melted into her embrace, crying for real now. Not the fake tantrum tears, but genuine sobs that came from somewhere deep and honest. She held him tight, one hand on the back of his head, rocking him slightly the way you do with younger children. It's okay, baby. It's okay. We all make mistakes. We all have moments we're not proud of. Linda looked over Connor's shoulder at Daniel, her own tears flowing freely now. Thank you, she mouthed silently. Thank you. Daniel picked up his chocolate bar and stood slowly. His knees were a little stiff from kneeling on the hard floor. He started to walk back to his mother, but stopped when he felt a small hand grab his jacket. Connor had pulled away from his mom and was standing now, his face blotchy and his nose running. Wait, he said. What's your name? Daniel. I'm Connor. The boy wiped his nose with the back of his hand. Thank you for being nice to me. Even when I was being really bad. You weren't bad, Daniel said, and he meant it. You were just upset. There's a difference. Connor nodded, not entirely understanding but sensing the kindness in Daniel's words. Will you be my friend? The question hung in the air. Daniel glanced at his mother, who was watching with tears in her own eyes now, her hand pressed to her chest. He looked at Linda, who was also watching, her expression unreadable but intense. He looked at all the other shoppers who had stopped judging and started witnessing something they didn't quite have words for. Yeah, Daniel said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Yeah, I can be your friend. Connor's face broke into a watery smile, the first genuine one anyone in that store had seen from him. He stuck out his hand formally, the way kids do when they're trying to be grown up. Daniel shook it, and something unspoken passed between them. Rachel stepped forward and gently guided Daniel back to their spot in line, her arm around his shoulders. She didn't say anything, but Daniel could feel her shaking slightly. When he looked up at her, she was crying silently, pride and love and sadness all mixed together in her expression. The cashier, who had been watching the entire thing, wiped at her own eyes quickly and cleared her throat. Next in line, please, she called out, but her voice was softer than before. As Rachel placed their modest basket on the conveyor belt, Daniel heard movement behind them. Linda was helping Connor to his feet, and the boy was quiet now, subdued but not in a defeated way. In a thoughtful way. What none of them knew yet was that this 5-minute encounter on a Tuesday afternoon in Save Mart was about to change all of their lives in ways they couldn't possibly imagine. 3 days had passed since the incident at Save Mart, and Daniel had almost convinced himself it was just another random moment in life. Something that happened and then faded away like most things do. He'd gone back to his normal routine, helping his mom around their small apartment, doing homework at the kitchen table, and trying to figure out how he'd replace that chocolate bar before his sister's birthday. It was Friday afternoon when someone knocked on their apartment door. Rachel was in the kitchen, preparing an early dinner before her evening shift at the diner. Daniel was in the living room attempting to fix an old radio he'd found at a yard sale. He loved tinkering with things, figuring out how they worked. His mom always said he had good hands for fixing stuff. "Daniel, can you get that?" Rachel called out, her hands covered in flour from the biscuits she was making. Daniel set down his screwdriver and walked to the door. Through the peephole, he saw something unexpected. Linda stood in the hallway, and beside her was Connor, holding something wrapped in bright blue paper. Daniel's stomach did a small flip. Why were they here? How did they even know where he lived? He opened the door slowly. Hi? Linda smiled, but it was a nervous smile, the kind adults get when they're not quite sure how something will be received. "Hello, Daniel. I hope we're not intruding. The manager at Save Mart, Mr. Chen, he knows your mother from her regular visits. He gave us your address. I hope that's okay." Rachel appeared behind Daniel, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel, confusion written across her face. "Can I help you, Mrs. Torres?" Linda extended her hand. "I'm Linda Fitzgerald. This is my son, Connor. We met your son the other day at the grocery store." Recognition dawned on Rachel's face, followed immediately by concern. Oh yes. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine. Better than fine, actually." Linda glanced down at Connor, who was shifting his weight from foot to foot, nervous energy radiating off him. "We were hoping we could talk to you both for a few minutes, if you have time." Rachel hesitated, then stepped back, opening the door wider. "Of course, please come in. Excuse the mess. We weren't expecting company. The apartment was small but clean. The furniture had seen better days, most of it picked up from thrift stores or left behind by previous tenants. But Rachel kept everything neat, and there were small touches of warmth everywhere. Drawings from Daniel's little sister, Lily, covered the refrigerator. A vase with wildflowers Daniel had picked sat on the coffee table. Family photos in mismatched frames lined a shelf. Linda and Connor stepped inside, and Daniel noticed how Connor's eyes took everything in without judgment, just curiosity. The boy clutched his wrapped package tighter. "Please sit down," Rachel said, gesturing to their worn couch. "Can I get you something to drink?" "Water, tea? We're fine, thank you." Linda sat and Connor sat beside her, the package in his lap. "We won't take much of your time. I know you're probably busy." Rachel sat in the armchair across from them, and Daniel remained standing, not quite sure what to do with himself. The whole situation felt surreal. Linda took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "First, I want to say thank you. What your son did the other day at the store, it was extraordinary. I've been a parent for 8 years, and I've read every parenting book, attended workshops, talked to therapists, and nothing, absolutely nothing, got through to Connor the way those 5 minutes with Daniel did." Connor looked down at his lap, his cheeks flushing slightly. "I'm not proud of how things have been," Linda continued, her voice thick with emotion. "Connor is our only child, and his father and I, we've given him everything material anyway. But somewhere along the way, we forgot to teach him the things that actually matter. We forgot that stuff doesn't equal happiness, that having more doesn't make you better than anyone else." Rachel shifted uncomfortably. "I'm sure you're doing your best. Every parent is. That's kind of you to say, but honestly, we weren't. We were taking the easy route, buying things instead of setting boundaries, saying yes to avoid tantrums." Linda looked directly at Rachel. "Your son taught mine more in 5 minutes than we've managed in years. He showed Connor what real generosity looks like, what it means to think about someone else before yourself." Connor suddenly spoke up, his voice quiet but determined. "I couldn't stop thinking about it, about how Daniel was saving that chocolate for his sister, and he was going to give it to me anyway, even though I was being really bad, even though I have everything and he—" The boy trailed off, seeming to realize how the sentence might sound. "It's okay," Daniel said softly. "You can say it. Even though you don't have as much as me," Connor finished. "But you were happier than I was. And nicer. And I kept thinking about that. How come having all this stuff doesn't make me happy like I thought it would?" The room fell quiet. Rachel blinked rapidly, fighting back tears. These were the kind of questions that revealed something profound happening inside a young mind. Linda cleared her throat. Connor wanted to come here. He insisted, actually. He has something for you, Daniel. Connor stood up and walked over to where Daniel was standing. Up close, Daniel could see that the boy's eyes were serious, intense even. This wasn't a casual visit. This meant something to him. This is for you, Connor said, holding out the wrapped package. And there's something else for your sister, too. For her birthday. Daniel took the package carefully. It had weight to it. He glanced at his mother, who nodded slightly, giving him permission to open it. He peeled back the wrapping paper to reveal a jacket. Not just any jacket, but a really nice one. The kind with a proper zipper that didn't stick, thick material that would actually keep the cold out and no holes or worn patches anywhere. Connor noticed your jacket was pretty old, Linda explained. He picked this one out himself. Spent an hour in the store making sure it was the right one. Daniel ran his hand over the material, speechless. I can't accept this. This is too much, please, Connor said urgently. Please take it. I want you to have it. I used my own money. Well, birthday money that my grandparents gave me. But it's mine and I want you to have it. Rachel stood up, her voice tight. This is incredibly generous, but there's more, Linda interrupted gently. She reached into her purse and pulled out another wrapped package, smaller and flatter. This is for Lily. Connor told me about her birthday, about the chocolate. We got her something we hope she'll like. Daniel's hands were shaking slightly as he took the second package. Inside was a beautiful art set, the kind with real quality colored pencils, markers, and a thick sketch pad. His little sister loved to draw, would spend hours with whatever scraps of paper and broken crayons they could find, creating whole worlds with her imagination. How did you know she likes art? Daniel asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I guessed, Connor admitted, because there are drawings all over your fridge and they're really good. I figured she might want better stuff to draw with. Rachel was crying now, not bothering to hide it. This is too much. Really, this is too generous. We can't, please, Linda said, and there was something almost desperate in her voice. Please let us do this, not because we're trying to pay you back or because we feel guilty. Though honestly, I do feel guilty, but because what happened the other day, it changed something in our family. Connor has been different. Quieter, yes, but in a good way. Thoughtful. He's been talking to us about things that matter, asking questions about people and feelings and why things are the way they are. She paused, looking at her son with such love and hope that it was almost painful to witness. He asked if we could volunteer somewhere, help people who need it. An 8-year-old who 2 weeks ago couldn't go 5 minutes without demanding a new toy is asking to volunteer. That's because of your son, Mrs. Torres. That's because Daniel showed him something real. Connor moved closer to Daniel. Can I ask you something? Sure. How come you were so nice to me? I was being really mean and loud and everyone was mad at me. But you were just nice. Daniel thought about it for a moment. My mom taught me that everyone's going through something. And that being mean back to someone who's already upset just makes everything worse. I wasn't trying to be special or anything. I just thought maybe you needed a friend right then. I did, Connor said simply. I really did. I didn't even know it, but I did. Linda stood up, composing herself. There's one more thing I wanted to mention. My husband, Robert, he owns a small accounting firm downtown. They've been looking for someone to join the office staff. It's administrative work mostly, but it's good pay and benefits. Real benefits, health insurance, dental, the whole package. Better hours than restaurant work, too. Rachel's hand went to her chest. I don't have experience in that kind of environment. I've been waitressing for 12 years. You don't need accounting experience for this position. They need someone organized, reliable, good with people. From what I've seen, from what Mr. Chen told me about you, you're all of those things. Linda pulled out a business card and set it on the coffee table. No pressure. No obligation. Just think about it. If you're interested, give Robert a call. He's expecting to hear from you. The air in the small apartment felt charged with possibility, with the weight of moments that changed trajectories. Daniel stood there in his new jacket, holding art supplies for his sister, trying to process how a simple act of kindness had somehow spiraled into all of this. Connor suddenly stepped forward and hugged Daniel, quick and tight, the way kids do when they're overcome with feelings they don't have words for yet. Thank you for being my friend, he whispered. Can we hang out sometime? Maybe play basketball or something? Daniel hugged him back, surprised but genuine. Yeah, I'd like that. As Linda and Connor prepared to leave, Rachel walked them to the door, still clutching the business card like it might disappear if she let go. After they left, mother and son stood in their small living room surrounded by unexpected gifts and even more unexpected possibilities. Daniel, Rachel said finally, pulling him close. I don't even know what to say. What you did, who you are, I'm so proud I could burst. I just gave him a chocolate bar, Mom. No, baby. You gave him something much more valuable than that. You gave him a mirror to see himself clearly, and somehow, that changed everything. 2 months had passed since that Friday afternoon visit, and Rachel still sometimes had to pinch herself to believe it was all real. She'd called the number on the business card the next day, her hands shaking as she dialed. Robert Fitzgerald had been warm and welcoming on the phone, insisting she come in for an interview that same week. The interview had felt less like a test and more like a conversation. He'd asked about her experience managing the chaos of a busy diner, handling difficult customers, keeping track of orders and inventory. That's exactly the kind of multitasking we need here, he'd said with a genuine smile. She'd started the following Monday. The pay was nearly double what she'd made at Betty's Diner, and for the first time in 12 years, Rachel had health insurance. Real health insurance, the kind where you could actually go to the doctor without worrying about the bill for months afterward. The hours were 9 to 5, which meant she could have dinner with her kids every single night. No more double shifts, no more coming home at midnight with aching feet and grease stains on her uniform. But the biggest change wasn't in Rachel's life. It was in Daniel's. Every Saturday morning for the past 8 weeks, Daniel and Connor had met at the basketball court 3 blocks from Daniel's apartment. At first it had been awkward. They were from completely different worlds, after all. Connor had never taken public transportation before. He'd never had to think about whether he could afford a snack from the corner store. Daniel had never been inside a house with more than 1 bathroom, or seen a video game console that wasn't at least 5 years old, but basketball was a language they both spoke. Connor wasn't particularly good at first. He'd spent most of his life indoors, playing video games or watching shows on his tablet. His shots bounced off the rim more often than they went in, and he got winded after just a few minutes of running. But he kept showing up, kept trying, and slowly he got better. More importantly, they talked. Real conversations. The kind that ranged from silly topics like which superhero would win in a fight, to deeper ones about family, school, and what they wanted to be when they grew up. I used to think I wanted to be a lawyer like my dad wants, Connor admitted one Saturday, dribbling the ball lazily, because lawyers make a lot of money. But now I'm not sure. Maybe I want to do something that helps people more directly, you know? Daniel caught the pass Connor threw him. What's wrong with being a lawyer? Lawyers help people too, don't they? Yeah, I guess. But it's different. My dad spends all day looking at numbers and paperwork. He barely talks about his clients like they're real people. They're just cases. Connor paused, thinking, I want to do something where I can see the difference I'm making. Like a teacher, maybe, or a doctor. Those are good jobs, Daniel said, taking a shot that swished through the net. My mom always says the best job is one where you go home feeling like you mattered that day. Your mom is really smart. Yeah, she is. This particular Saturday was different, though. Connor had arrived with his mother, and Linda was carrying several bags that looked suspiciously heavy. What's all that? Daniel asked, wiping sweat from his forehead. Linda set the bags down on the bench beside the court. Donations. Connor and I have been going through our house, and we realized we have so much stuff we never use. Clothes Connor outgrew, toys he doesn't play with anymore, books he's already read. We were going to take it all to Goodwill, but Connor had a different idea. Connor jumped in, excited. I thought maybe we could give it to people who need it directly. Like actually hand it to them instead of just dropping it off somewhere. Make it more personal. Daniel grabbed his water bottle, taking a long drink. That's cool. Where are you thinking? Well, we were hoping you might know, Linda said carefully. Your family has lived in this neighborhood a long time, right? You probably know people who could use some help. We thought maybe you could come with us. Show us where to go. Daniel felt a strange mix of emotions. Pride that they trusted him. Discomfort at being seen as the guide to poverty. Like he was the tour director of struggle. But he could see in Connor's face that this wasn't about pity or charity points. The kid genuinely wanted to help. He'd been changed by their encounter, and this was him trying to figure out what to do with that change. Yeah, okay, Daniel said finally. There's a few places we could go. They started at the apartment complex where Daniel's elderly neighbor, Mr. Peterson, lived. He was the man Daniel sometimes did odd jobs for, the one with bad knees who needed help carrying groceries. But Mr. Peterson wasn't alone in his struggles. The building was full of people barely getting by, senior citizens on fixed incomes, single parents working multiple jobs, families that had been forgotten by everyone except the landlord who came around for rent. Daniel knocked on Mr. Peterson's door, and when the old man answered, he was surprised to see the small crowd in the hallway. "Daniel, my boy, what's all this?" "Mr. Peterson, these are my friends, Connor and his mom, Linda. They have some things they thought you might be able to use." What happened over the next hour was something that would stick with Connor for the rest of his life. They went door to door, Daniel making introductions, Linda and Connor offering what they'd brought. Warm jackets for people who'd been making do with thin sweaters, toys for kids who'd been playing with broken hand-me-downs, books for families who couldn't afford trips to the bookstore. But more than the stuff, it was the conversations that mattered. Mrs. Chen on the third floor, who'd come from Vietnam 40 years ago and still missed her homeland. She told them stories about her childhood while accepting a warm blanket with tears in her eyes. The Rodriguez family on the second floor, where the father had been injured at work and was fighting for disability benefits. Their kids' faces lit up at the toys and books like it was Christmas morning. Connor watched Daniel with each person they visited. Watched how he knew everyone's names, remembered details about their lives, asked follow-up questions about things they'd mentioned weeks ago. This wasn't charity to Daniel. These were his neighbors, his community, people who mattered to him. At one apartment, they met a woman named Patricia who had 3 kids under the age of 6. The apartment was clean but sparse, and the kids were obviously hungry, eyeing the visitors with the kind of wariness that comes from disappointment. Linda noticed immediately. "Have you all had lunch yet?" Linda asked gently. Patricia's pride warred with her children's needs on her face. "We're fine. The kids had breakfast. It was almost 3 in the afternoon." "Well, we haven't eaten," Linda lied smoothly. "And I was just thinking how nice it would be to get pizza for everyone. Connor, why don't you and Daniel run down to Angelo's and get a few pies, my treat? Get enough for everyone in the building who wants some." Connor caught on quickly. "Yeah, I'm starving." "Come on, Daniel." The 2 boys left and Linda stayed behind to chat with Patricia, woman to woman, mother to mother. By the time they returned with 6 large pizzas, Patricia was crying but smiling too, and Linda was holding her hand. They set up an impromptu pizza party in the courtyard of the apartment building. People Daniel had known his whole life mingled with Connor and Linda, strangers becoming friends over paper plates and sharing stories. Kids ran around playing tag, their earlier wariness forgotten. Adults laughed, swapped phone numbers, talked about maybe organizing a regular community dinner. Connor sat next to Daniel on the edge of a planter box, watching it all unfold. "This feels really good," he said quietly. "Like really, really good. Better than anything I ever bought felt." "Yeah," Daniel agreed. "Helping people usually does. Is this what you feel like all the time?" "When you help Mr. Peterson or look after your sister or do nice stuff for people?" Daniel considered the question. "I don't know if I'd say all the time. Sometimes I'm just tired or annoyed like anyone else. But yeah, when I can make someone's day a little easier, it feels right. Like that's what we're supposed to do for each other." Connor was quiet for a moment. "I wasted a lot of time being mad about stupid stuff, didn't I? Like all those tantrums about toys and games and things that don't even matter. You're 8. You're allowed to make mistakes. The important thing is you're learning." "I'm learning from you," Connor said, looking at his friend with something like awe. "You're the best person I know, Daniel. I want to be more like you." Daniel felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment. "I'm not that special, man. I'm just doing what my mom taught me. That's exactly what makes you special. You actually do it. Most people just talk about being good. You actually are good." Across the courtyard, Linda and Rachel stood together watching their sons. They'd become friends too over these past weeks, bonding over coffee and conversations that ranged from parenting struggles to life dreams they'd thought were too late to chase. "Look at them," Rachel said softly. "A couple months ago they were strangers. Now look." "Connor talks about Daniel constantly," Linda admitted. "Daniel this, Daniel that. He wants to know what Daniel would do in situations. He's become Connor's moral compass. That's a lot of pressure for a 12-year-old. Maybe, but Daniel doesn't seem to feel the pressure. He just is who he is. Linda paused. You raised an extraordinary kid, Rachel. So did you. Connor's got a good heart. It was always there. He just needed to remember how to use it. As the sun started to set and the pizza boxes emptied, people began drifting back to their apartments, calling out goodbyes and thank yous. Connor and his mother packed up the empty boxes, helped clean up the courtyard, and prepared to head home. Before they left, Connor ran back to Daniel one more time.
Same time next Saturday?
For basketball? Yeah, but maybe after we could do this again. Find more people who need stuff. I've already started going through more things at home, and I'm going to ask my dad if his company can donate money or supplies or something. Daniel grinned. Sounds like a plan. Connor hugged him quickly, then ran back to his mother. As they walked away, Connor looked back one more time, waving. Daniel waved back, then felt his mother's arm around his shoulders. You started something special, you know that? Rachel said. I just gave a kid a chocolate bar, Mom. You gave him something to believe in, and now he's paying it forward. She kissed the top of his head. That's how you change the world, baby. One person at a time. Daniel looked around at the apartment building, at the neighbors who were smiling more than usual, at the community that felt a little bit stronger than it had that morning. Maybe his mom was right. Maybe small acts of kindness really could ripple out in ways you'd never expect, touching lives and changing hearts and making the world just a little bit better. One chocolate bar at a time. 6 months had passed since that afternoon in Save Mart. And if you'd told Daniel that giving away a chocolate bar would change his entire life, he wouldn't have believed you. But here he was, sitting in the community center that hadn't existed 6 months ago, watching kids from all over the neighborhood learn to paint, play chess, and just be kids in a safe space. The community center had been Connor's idea, actually. Well, Connor's and his father's. Robert Fitzgerald had been skeptical at first when his 8-year-old son came to him with a proposal written in crayon on notebook paper. But Connor had been persistent, presenting his case like a tiny lawyer. The neighborhood needed a place where kids could go after school, where families could gather, where people could get help with things like job applications and tax forms. Dad, you're always saying you want to give back, Connor had argued. This is how we can actually do it. Not just writing checks to charities we never see. Real help for real people. Robert had driven through Daniel's neighborhood, seen the lack of resources, talked to community members, and realized his son was right. 3 months later, using a vacant building his company owned and donations from other local businesses he'd convinced to chip in, the Eastside Community Center opened its doors. But the center was just one part of how things had changed. Daniel sat at one of the tables, helping a 6th grader named Tommy with his math homework. Tommy struggled with fractions and his parents worked evenings, so there was no one at home to help him. 2 nights a week, Daniel volunteered as a homework helper, along with a handful of other teenagers from the area. Across the room, Connor was teaching a group of younger kids how to play basketball. He'd gotten pretty good over the past months, all those Saturday morning sessions paying off. But more than the skills, he'd learned patience. He knew what it felt like to be bad at something and keep trying anyway. He knew how much it meant when someone believed you could improve. Nice shot, Kevin, Connor called out as a 7-year-old finally made his first basket after 20 tries. The kid's face split into the biggest grin, and Connor high-fived him like he'd just won the championship. Linda was there too, having become one of the center's most dedicated volunteers. She ran a weekly cooking class where she taught families how to make healthy meals on a tight budget. She'd learned a lot from Rachel about stretching $1, about making something out of nothing, about the creativity that comes from necessity. Rachel herself had become something of a community organizer. Her administrative skills from the accounting firm translated well into coordinating volunteers, managing schedules, and making sure the center ran smoothly. She still worked her day job, but she spent most evenings and weekends here in the place that had become a second home. Tonight was special, though. It was the center's 6-month anniversary celebration, and people from all over the neighborhood had shown up. There was food, music, and a warmth in the air that had nothing to do with the space heaters. Mr. Peterson sat in his favorite chair by the window, holding court with a group of kids who loved his stories about the old days. Mrs. Chen had brought homemade spring rolls that disappeared within minutes. The Rodriguez family, where the father had finally gotten his disability claim approved, had donated their time to paint a beautiful mural on the center's main wall. It showed the neighborhood, all its buildings and people, connected by intertwining vines covered in flowers. Daniel finished helping Tommy with his homework and stood up to stretch. That's when he noticed someone new had arrived. A woman with a camera and a notebook stood near the entrance talking to Linda. She looked official, like someone from the news or a magazine. Linda caught Daniel's eye and waved him over. "Daniel, this is Andrea Martinez. She's a reporter for the city newspaper. She heard about the center and wants to do a story on how it got started." Daniel felt his stomach drop. "Oh, I don't think I need to be part of that. This is Connor's thing, really. And his parents." "Actually," Andrea said with a kind smile, "everyone I've talked to tonight has mentioned you. They say you're the reason all of this happened."
Something about a chocolate bar?
Before Daniel could respond, Connor appeared at his side. "It's true. Daniel's the whole reason. He's the one who taught me that being kind matters more than having stuff." "I really didn't do anything special," Daniel protested, feeling his cheeks burn. "I just tried to help when someone was having a bad day." "That's exactly the point," Andrea said, flipping open her notebook. "Sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest ripples." "Would you mind telling me the story?" Daniel glanced at his mother, who nodded encouragingly. So he told it, with Connor filling in his perspective and Linda adding hers. The story of a tantrum in a grocery store, a boy willing to give up something precious, and how that moment changed everything. Andrea wrote furiously, occasionally asking questions. When the story was done, she looked up with tears in her eyes. "That's beautiful. And all of this came from that one moment. It's not just the center," Connor added eagerly. "Daniel and I volunteer at the food bank every other Sunday now. And my school started a donation drive after I talked about it in class. And my dad's company is sponsoring 3 families' rent for a year while they get back on their feet." "My daughter Lily," Rachel chimed in. "She's been teaching free art classes to younger kids every Saturday. She used those art supplies Connor gave her for her birthday, and now she wants to share what she knows." Andrea shook her head in wonder. This is exactly the kind of story people need to hear right now. "Do you mind if I take some photos?" Over the next hour, Andrea captured images of the center in action. Kids laughing and learning, families sharing meals, teenagers mentoring younger children, Connor and Daniel shooting hoops in the small gym area, their friendship evident in every easy interaction. Rachel and Linda working side by side in the kitchen, chatting like the close friends they'd become. But the photo that would end up on the front page of the newspaper was simpler. It was Daniel and Connor sitting on the bench outside the center, Daniel's arm around the younger boy's shoulders, both of them smiling genuinely at the camera. In Connor's hand, visible in the photo, was a chocolate bar. The same kind Daniel had offered him 6 months ago. Connor now kept one in his backpack always, a reminder of the moment that changed his life. The newspaper article ran 2 weeks later, and suddenly everyone knew the story. The community center got more donations, more volunteers, more support than they knew what to do with. Other neighborhoods started reaching out, asking how they could create similar spaces. Schools invited Daniel and Connor to come speak about kindness and empathy. But the attention made Daniel uncomfortable. He didn't feel like a hero. He'd just been raised by a mother who taught him to see people's humanity, to offer help when he could, to remember that everyone was fighting battles you couldn't see. One evening, about a month after the article came out, Daniel and Connor sat on the steps of the community center, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. It was quiet for once, just the two of them. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if you hadn't helped me that day?" Connor asked suddenly. Daniel shrugged. "I try not to think about what ifs. It happened. We're here now. But if you hadn't, I'd probably still be that spoiled kid throwing tantrums in stores. My parents would still be buying my affection instead of actually parenting. I wouldn't know what it feels like to help someone and have it matter." "You would have figured it out eventually," Daniel said. "You're not a bad person, Connor. You never were. You just needed someone to show you a different way. You showed me that people matter more than things. That being rich doesn't make you better than anyone. That the best feeling in the world isn't getting what you want. It's helping someone else get what they need." Connor pulled out the chocolate bar from his pocket, looking at it thoughtfully. "I still haven't eaten this one." I keep meaning to, but then I think about what it represents and I just can't. It's just chocolate, man. It's okay to eat it, I know. But it's also not just chocolate. It's a reminder. Connor looked at his friend. You changed my life, Daniel. And through me, you changed a lot of other lives too, all because you were willing to give something up for a stranger who didn't deserve it. Daniel was quiet for a moment, thinking about his mother's words from months ago, about small acts of kindness rippling out in unexpected ways, about changing the world one person at a time. You deserved it, he said finally. Everyone deserves compassion, especially when they're struggling, even if the struggle is on the inside where people can't see it. Connor nodded, understanding. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching people come and go from the center. Families, friends, neighbors, all connected by this space that existed because two boys from different worlds became friends. Hey, Daniel? Yeah, thank you. For everything. For being patient with me. For teaching me what really matters. For being the best friend I've ever had. Daniel smiled, bumping his shoulder against Connor's. Back at you, buddy. Inside the center, Rachel watched her son through the window. Her heart so full it almost hurt. She thought about that day in Save Mart. About the chocolate bar Daniel had been saving for Lily. About the choice he'd made to help a stranger instead. She'd been so proud then. But she was even prouder now, watching him navigate small fame with humility, continuing to show up and do the work, even when cameras weren't around. Linda joined her at the window. They're good kids. The best, Rachel agreed. I was thinking, Linda said carefully. Connor's birthday is next month. He wants to do something different this year. Instead of a party with presents, he wants to organize a neighborhood cleanup day. Then maybe a cookout here at the center where everyone brings a dish to share. Rachel laughed softly. That sounds like Connor now. Hard to believe this is the same kid from 6 months ago. People can change, Linda said, when they're given a reason to. When someone believes they can be better. Outside, Connor finally unwrapped the chocolate bar and broke it in half, offering one piece to Daniel. Together? He asked. Together, Daniel agreed. They ate the chocolate as the sun finished setting. Two friends who'd started as strangers, connected by a simple act that proved kindness was never wasted, that compassion could transform, that sometimes the smallest gestures offered with genuine heart could change not just one life, but dozens, hundreds, maybe even thousands, all because one boy chose to see another's humanity, even in the middle of a tantrum, all because he believed that everyone, even at their worst moment, deserves a second chance, all because he understood what his mother had always taught him, what he'd now taught Connor, and what they were both teaching their community. We're all in this together. And when we take care of each other, when we choose kindness over judgment, generosity over greed, connection over indifference, we don't just change individual lives, we change the world.